Welcome back, YouTube gang. This is episode 6 of VTalks, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. All I'm going to be doing is pretty much having a story time. I'm going to be talking about this character and their story. No in-depth analysis, nothing like that. So, this is Duplex Mitsiplik. He is a character from my friend David who plays in my D&D game. And Duplex grew up in a city named Fordor. Fordor was a human city that was protected by dwarven constructs that were left there several hundred years ago. The guard has only been these golems. There has not been war or strife, and the entire country of Lord, which is where Duplex had lived, is at peace, or was rather. One day, there was a festival in his hometown, and he also got the day off. So Duplex decided to go out and have a festive time. One of the things that he noticed while going out and about is he noticed that the prince was visiting his city. Throughout the day, he was looking for something along the lines of a job. So, by the end of the day, once he had gotten his festivities and all of his celebration out of the way, he wanted to put up a job. He wanted to hire somebody. He ended up writing up a job to post on the job board. And that night he had gone out, and it was strangely quiet for the night, but he had gone out to go post this job. And once he got this job posted, he realized that it was pretty late at night. It was about 8 o'clock. Not too late, but it was strangely quiet. He was headed back home and was assaulted by a person, what he thought to be a drunken fool or somebody who was inebriated, but after skirmishing with this man, realized that it was a ghoul or a undead creature. So he skirmished with this thing only to get it out of the way long enough for him to escape. And he runs back to his home. His father and his mother had already passed away, and his house was his inheritance. So everything that was there was his. He ran back home. He decided, I'm going to need to immediately leave this place. If there's undead here, then there's obviously going to be a problem. So he decides to grab all of whatever he can with him and take that. And through this, he realizes that there is a cold sucking from his soul. He feels that there's just something not right about the room. And looking around, nothing is evident. Nothing is obvious that it is there to attack him. But through investigation, he realizes there is his own shadow. It is being attacked by something else, a darker form, a dark shape that was there to suck away his essence. And in seeing that, he had gathered all of the things that he needed and quickly left his own home. He fled from there, and he saw that the entire city was under attack from the undead. He was asking himself, what is going on with the golems? The golems should be here to protect us. That's what most people in the city would have been thinking. And he decided to go to a place that he knew had weapons. So he was running to that place first. He had his knife from his kitchen as well as some other things, other utensils. So he ends up running through the streets only to realize that's not a good idea. So he ends up going on rooftop, and there are still things up in the air, things flying around that are dangerous. And he decides to keep moving but fighting those things along the way as they chase him. He kills this apparition that seems to be floating above houses and eventually gets to this place where he can loot up on some equipment. So he goes inside, finds a bow, finds some arrows, finds an actual weapon, and decides to stick to that stuff. Puts it on, equips it, and now he's got to figure out how to get out of here. But before he can leave, once again he is confronted by this shadowy stalker that is there to kill him, and he decides to leave through the front door, just get out of there and head straight back onto the roofs and find the quickest way out of the city. The city of Fordor had walls all around it with really only 2 exits as far as what would be easily accessible and just could be walked through. So these 2 gates, one to the north and one to the west. So he decided to go to the one in the north because it was closer. He travels along these rooftops for a while and sees a armored figure with a sword, and he's walking into an alleyway kind of strangely, but it was obvious that that guy was probably undead as well. And after some travel on rooftop, he ends up seeing a golem get thrown out of a building, and these golems are towering beings. They're about 10 feet tall, give or take, and they're just made of iron, and they have acid breath, and they have resistance to all types of fire. So these things are perfectly built to be suitable to defeat undead easily. But this thing was getting thrown around, and he sees that knight that he had seen before come out of the building, and the golem that he is fighting is missing an entire arm. So this guy is using his sword almost as a master, but it seems that this knight had this golem outclassed. So it was obvious that he needed to keep moving, and he wasn't seen, luckily, being on the roofs. So he travels long enough to get to the gate, and he sees a pile of bones at the gate, and he was worried that these bones would be perhaps putting themselves together to fight him on his way out. But actually what had happened was a tabaxi named Arwen and the prince had already fought that skeleton and had moved on. It was a minotaur skeleton. So Duplex comes upon this beaten and destroyed skeleton and claims one of the femurs as his own, just to have as a weapon, and he decided to use that as a maul. So he now had this maul of a femur as well as the weapons that he had collected, and escaped outside of the front of the city. On his way out, he had only briefly looked behind him to see what would become of his previous home. Fordor was obviously no more, but he could see as he looked back a dark, flying mass going over the entire city, breathing a cloud of shadow, and as that shadow hit the buildings and hit the cobblestone ground, he could see it all just age hundreds of years and turn to dust and fall apart. The wood rotted and pulled away from itself, and the entire city just seemed to crumble right before his very eyes with this shadowy breath. And that was the last Duplex ever saw of Fordor. That was also my very first game that I ended up running with this character. The only game I had ever run before that was Arwen the Tabaxi. She was the character that ran through the city one game beforehand. So this was my second game running, but it was still pretty much my first time running that character. And by the next game session, so session 3 for me, but it was technically session 2 for Duplex as well as Arwen, they ended up meeting together outside of this city. They met in the forest as refugees, and they decided to travel with each other. And only once they got to the next town did they then realize that they were traveling with the prince. They hadn't known that that's who he was, but it was just made obvious with his status and his way of presenting himself. It seemed clear that he was royalty and that he could hold his own. The characters went to a place called Coagula, which was a little fishing town, and they took a boat from there over the ocean to a new city. It was on the same continent, so they just pretty much went down the coast for quite a while. It was about a month they went down the coast, and they reached a new city called Wavetown. Wavetown was a harbor city that was much bigger than Coagula was, but not quite as big as Fordor. And their goal was to reach Drivenhall, which was the capital of Lord. And that way they could speak to the king and inform him of what has happened to the city. The characters eventually made it there through some trials of bandits and underwater creatures that would attack them on the ocean, and they traveled up. They saw a black obelisk, which may be important down the road. They eventually get to the king and speak to the king, and they have audience with the royalty there. And during the court, they meet none other than the mastermind himself, who had orchestrated all of the undead to go attack Fordor. So that is Duplex's origin story. I hope you guys like that. I am running pretty much at the end of the video here, and there's obviously a lot. That was my first session, and that was several months ago, but now I've got plenty of months of game time, so I could tell you guys all about that, and I might even end up doing more D&D characters down the road. So hope you guys like hearing this story. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Jagon Fantas and Lord Ventilus, and I will see you guys next time.